Yo, what's good everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be breaking down some of my favorite GPP or tournament plays for this Week 2 NFL DraftKings main slate. What we're going to do is break down a couple of my favorite game stacks. We're then going to dive into some of my favorite individual plays and then wrap it up with another low-priced option, just like we did yesterday in my favorite cash plays video. So go check that out if you haven't yet. With that being said, let's dive into this spreadsheet here. And as always with these spreadsheets here, listing out those highest implied game totals in the top left-hand corner, followed up by the highest implied team totals as well, if you kind of want to use that as a reference point as I'm going through these plays here today. With that being said, let's dive into these game stacks here, and one of the game stacks I like targeting this week is that game between the Cardinals and Raiders. And yes, this will probably be a pretty popular game to target, considering a lot of the big names are off of this slate. No Mahomes, no Josh Allen, no Jalen Hurts, no Justin Herbert, and so a lot of people are kind of just going to resort to this game. Now you notice here, I got Kyler over Derek Carr, and I don't have Davante Adams on here either. I think both of those guys are absolutely in play. I talked about both of them in my cash video just yesterday, but if you want to get a little contrarian, I think the way to do that is with Kyler Murray and stacking him up with one of his pass catchers. And the reason I only want to stack him up with one of his pass catchers is because he offers that rushing upside, and I'm banking on him, or hoping at least, that he scores a rushing touchdown in this game. If that happens to be the case, or even two rushing touchdowns, we don't need to stack him up with more than one pass catcher. I like going with Hollywood Brown here. He seems due for a bounce back, didn't have a great week one. These guys do obviously have chemistry together dating back to their college days. And then I went with the number 2 and 3 pass catchers here for the Raiders. Again, I don't mind Davante Adams, but he's projecting to be one of the most popular plays on this Week 2 main slate. So going with Hunter Renfrow here and Darren Waller, these guys are still going to get targets thrown their way, and they're a lot cheaper than Davante Adams as well. There's a number of different ways that we can approach this game, but this is kind of how I want to go about it. And then another game stack I like targeting here this week is that game between the Colts and Jaguars. And I like stacking up Trevor Lawrence here with Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram, and then running it back there with Jonathan Taylor on the Colts side of things. Now, Trevor Lawrence didn't have the best week one. He missed a handful of throws, but Travis Etienne also dropped an easy walk-in touchdown. That didn't benefit either one of those guys. He is very affordable here, and although he didn't have the best week one, he did finish the week 3rd in the NFL with 28.3 expected fantasy points. So even though it wasn't his best outing, you like to know that the opportunity and chances were being taken in week one. Now you stack him up with Christian Kirk here, who had 12 targets in week one, led the team in air yards, led the team in routes run as well. I really like that. And again, a very affordable price here at $5,700. And then Evan Ingram played 73% of the snaps at the tight end position and had 5 targets go his way. If he's doing that again, I like the price at $3,600 there. If he happens to find the end zone, he could smash his value. And then again, running it back here with Jonathan Taylor, we all know what JT can do. It is a very expensive price there at $9,900, but having these guys on the Jag side, they're a lot more affordable, makes this stack a little easier to build. Now folks, before we hop into this next part here, if you could take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate that. I got a lot of football content coming your way this year, and for those of you who play NHL DFS, I'm a big hockey guy and got a lot of hockey content coming your way as well. Appreciate y'all. Let's get back into it. Alright, now hopping on down here to some of my favorite individual plays in stacks. We're going to kick it off with the quarterbacks there, and I really like Russ Wilson this week of the Denver Broncos. Back at home here in a good matchup against the Houston Texans after losing their week 1 matchup on the road against his former team, the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, probably some nerves there for Russ, playing with a brand new team. You still got to build some chemistry with your offensive players, but this is really a good bounce back spot for the Broncos as a whole, playing against the Texans at home. And I'm looking at a stat here just from last year. No quarterback attempted a higher percentage of his passes at least 20 yards down the field than Russ Wilson did. And unlike the Seattle Seahawks, the Houston Texans were miserable against the deep ball last year. They allowed the 4th highest deep completion percentage and the 7th most deep passing touchdowns. So yes, this is a great matchup for him, and I do expect the Broncos to play much better this week than they did last week. Now moving over here to the running backs, first guy I got there is Christian McCaffrey of the Carolina Panthers. I was honestly hoping that his projected ownership would be lower than what I'm looking at right now. It's around 16%. Based off of him kind of underperforming in week 1, I was hoping it'd be around 10%, but people are smart enough. They're figuring it out. All right, Christian McCaffrey didn't have a great week 1, but this is a good bounce back spot for him this week against the New York Giants. And look, he was just underutilized in week 1, and that's not going to happen going forward. Plus, Dontrell Hilliard of the Tennessee Titans shredded these Giants linebackers last week in the passing game. Christian McCaffrey should by all means be able to do that. Hilliard not only scored a 7-yard reception touchdown in that game, but scored a 23-yard reception touchdown as well. So if the Panthers are smart, they're going to take advantage of that and make sure that CMC is against those linebackers in the passing game. He is a little more expensive here at $8,900 as well, but maybe that will drive the ownership down just a little bit. Next is Javonte Williams there of the Denver Broncos, and honestly, based off of the usage we saw from him in the passing game last week, I think we could stack him up with Russ Wilson here for more of a contrarian stack. If you're playing single entries or 3-entry maxes, I don't think you need to do that. I'd rather do Russ Wilson and Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, or maybe even mix in one of those 3 tight ends that got involved last week, or even just do a 1-to-1 stack with Russ and Cortland Sutton. But if you're playing in the Millie Maker and you want to get a little more contrarian, you could certainly do that with Javonte. I don't expect him to see 12 targets again like he did in week 1, but he'll still be involved in the passing game. And if not, he's still going to get rushing attempts as well against a Houston Texans defense that allowed Jonathan Taylor to run for 161 yards against them just last week. So $6,500 here, a decent price for him as well for a guy that can definitely go for 20, 25, and even 30 DraftKings points. And then I got Antonio Gibson there of the Washington Commanders, who definitely took advantage of Brian Robinson being out in week 1. I know there were the fumble concerns in preseason and from last year, but hopefully he's kind of putting those issues to bed here early in the season, because he played really well in week 1, got involved in both the rushing and passing game, and has another good matchup to have a good week against the Detroit Lions, who just got decimated by the Philadelphia Eagles last week and allowed 216 rushing yards to that team and 4 rushing touchdowns. Now, that was split between Miles Sanders, Jalen Hurts, Kenneth Gainwell, and Boston Scott, but needless to say, that Detroit defense is concerning. Now, just want to take a quick minute to talk about one of the sponsors on this channel, Lucra. If you have not downloaded Lucra, it is completely free to get started. I'm actually going to throw a QR code up on the screen here right now. You can scan this with your phone. It's going to download the app, and once it does that, it's going to give you my referral code, which is GRIFF, GRIFF, and give you $25 in free play money. Now, you can use that free play money to compete against anybody, friends, family, or someone random, and if you win those contests, you'll actually see that free play money convert to real cash. So if you win enough of your contests with that free play money, you might legit never have to deposit a single dollar on Lucra. You can just build a bankroll from there. So again, I'll throw that QR code up on the screen one more time. You can scan this with your phone here. It'll download the app, include my referral code GRIFF, GRIFF, and give you that $25 in free play money. We then got the wide receivers here, and there's a lot of wide receivers that I like on the tournament side of things here this week. It's like that most week at the wide receiver position. I condensed it down to 5 guys here that I want to try and get some exposure to, but there was probably another 12 or so guys that I could have highlighted here. But on my spreadsheet, first guy I got there is Jamar Chase. Now, obviously, the Cincinnati Bengals came out flat last week. We probably saw Joe Burrow at his worst, and I expect them to play a lot better here this week in week 2. And I like this matchup here for Jamar Chase. He's probably going to see a lot of Trayvon Diggs, just like he did in college. And you might be a Trayvon Diggs believer. I think he makes the game exciting at the cornerback position. He's going to get some interceptions this year, just like he did last year, but this is not a matchup I'm concerned about. Trayvon Diggs gets burned way too much, especially by speedy wide receivers like Jamar Chase, to where I'm going to target that matchup. And look, Jamar Chase had an insane 2.02 opportunity-adjusted touchdowns in week 1. He finished that game with 16 targets, 129 receiving yards, and did find the end zone for damn near 32 DraftKings points. And that's the ceiling we get out of a guy like Chase week in and week out, especially in a matchup like this. And then another wide receiver corner cornerback matchup I like targeting here this week is the Miami Dolphins wide receivers against a banged up secondary for the Baltimore Ravens. You know, looking at this here right now, Marlon Humphrey has a groin injury, Marcus Peters ankle injury, Stevens has a quad injury, and Fuller obviously got injured last week, tearing his ACL. He's out for the season. So Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle could shred this secondary. And if those guys are healthy, Humphrey and Peters are great cornerbacks, but they're not healthy heading into week 2. Tyreek's got that speed to where he only needs a couple of plays to meet or crush value on any given week, and I like going back to him here this week, just like last week. Now, I mentioned earlier I like stacking up Cortland Sutton with Russ Wilson. He's probably too cheap here at $6,100 considering the matchup against Houston. Saw an average depth of target around 17 yards in his first game with Russ Wilson, and we all know that Russ isn't afraid to take those deep shots, and I just mentioned it when I was talking about Russ. Houston was not very good at stopping that all of last year. Plus, his projected ownership is less than 10% heading into this week, and that's far too low considering the matchup, so I'll definitely be stacking those guys up. Next is Allen Robinson, who was pretty much invisible in week 1 with his new team in the Los Angeles Rams, but this is a good bounce back spot for him. Not only him, the Los Angeles Rams as a whole, playing at home against the Atlanta Falcons. Now, $5,500 is very reasonable in price as well for a guy that could definitely go for 20, 25 plus DraftKings points and meet 4-5x value. So I'm kind of on the Rams as a whole here this week, and a lot of people seem to be off of Allen Robinson after that poor week 1 performance. There's definitely still a lot of Allen Robinson truthers out there, but I'm looking at around 10% ownership, and I would take that. And then wrapping up the wide receivers there with Elijah Moore of the New York Jets, and although it's been a very small sample size, I like the chemistry I've seen with Elijah Moore and Joe Flacco, who's going to be starting again this week against the Cleveland Browns. So it started last year, week 10, when Joe Flacco subbed in late for Mike White. He only threw 3 passes in that game, but 2 of them went to Elijah Moore, where he scored a touchdown and had 40 yards. And then the following week, those 2 tore it up together. Moore finished the game with 8 receptions, 141 receiving yards, and scored a touchdown in that game. And then last week, he had 5 receptions, finished the game with 49 receiving yards, but did have a touchdown nullified on an offensive pass interference. That was actually where Fuller got hurt for the Ravens, so I don't want to celebrate that by any means, but needless to say, he's getting opportunity at the goal line and in the red zone, and so I do like that. Elijah Moore is definitely a guy that could get you 20 DraftKings points and meet 4x value at this price. Now, I mentioned last week at the tight end position that I have no issue spending up for tight ends in my tournament lineups. It's definitely one way to try and make your lineups contrarian on most weeks. You know, if a guy like Travis Kelce's in the 6K range, he's going to be very popular, but guys like Mark Andrews kind of fly under the radar a little bit when they're priced here, and I like going there this week against the Miami Dolphins, who are expected to blitz a lot, and Lamar is not very good against the blitz. I talked about that yesterday in my cash video, so Andrews could see a lot of low A dot receptions in this game and kind of be a PPR monster here, and we know that he gets utilized in the red zone and at the goal line as well, a guy that has 2+ touchdown upside. So I like him at this price here, $6,400, and I think that game in general, kind of Miami and the Baltimore Ravens, has some sneaky shootout potential. And then Logan Thomas there at $3,400 played 62% of the offensive snaps in week 1, coming off of that ACL injury. Saw 5 targets in that game and has a great matchup here against the Detroit Lions. And Carson Wentz has notoriously not been afraid to throw to his tight ends in the past, but really what was encouraging is the 62% of offensive snaps coming off of that ACL injury. I think that's only going to go up going forward. And then I got the defenses here, and I'll keep this short and sweet. I don't mind spending up for the 49ers defense in my tournament lineups to get a little more contrarian. I think this is a good bounce back spot for them after losing in week 1 to the Chicago Bears, playing at home against the Seattle Seahawks, who did look good in that first half against Denver, but had nothing to show for in that second half. I was watching a video earlier this week, and there's one guy who said, I'm legit concerned the Seattle Seahawks showed everything they have to offer in that first half of the game against Denver, and now going forward, they're going to be pretty abysmal. I really didn't expect much from Geno Smith this year in general, and there's just a lot of talent on this 49ers defense to where they'll be able to create turnovers, pressure, and sacks in this game against Geno Smith. Next is the Pittsburgh Steelers playing at home against Mac Jones and the New England Patriots, who were not good at all in Miami last week. I expect them to play better this week, probably run the ball a little bit more, but still an offense I'm not concerned about. And yes, the Steelers will be missing Watt in this game, but that defense created a lot of turnovers last week, created a lot of pressure, and I kind of like the price there at home at $2,800. And then the Cincinnati Bengals defense, damn near the bare minimum price here at $2,200. Third cheapest defense on this main slate, playing against the Dallas Cowboys and backup quarterback Cooper Rush. And as always, we're going to wrap up the video here with a low-priced option or sub-4K wide receiver play. I'm going to roll with Richie James Jr. here in this spreadsheet, but I honestly still prefer Greg Dortch of the Arizona Cardinals at $3,500. I talked about him in my cash video yesterday, but Richie James Jr. here with Wan'Dale Robinson out for the New York Giants this week. We should see him play in the slot once again, just like he did last week, where he played 70% of the offensive snaps and was second on the team in targets with 6, just behind Saquon Barkley, and I certainly don't mind the matchup here at home against the Carolina Panthers. All right, everyone, that is going to wrap up this video here for today. As always, thank you all for taking the time out of your day to watch the content here on this channel. If you could like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate that. Let's have ourselves a great weekend here, folks. Let's win some money on Sunday as well. In the meantime, I'm out of here.